the artwork is this completely divorced from reality, like 70s post-hippie visions of like a utopian future. And then it's made even stranger by how depraved they were.
You are now listening to Male Worship Radio.
All right.
One thing I will say is I love comic book stores. Like as an adult, maybe they're even better than record stores.
Yeah, I agree.
Just because they're so
more to look at.
Visual. I think it's being a graphic designer too, and I'm sure you feel the same way because you're a printmaker, but that the appeal of stacks of things, stacks of the same thing, I don't know why there's something so awesome about it. So when you're like, you're in a record store, there's not stacks of the same thing. There's one of them, and then you sell it, and they go get another one. They don't put out like 7, whatever, Batman comics, and then all these variants and stuff. I find them to be probably, and I'm sure which one I like better, comic book stores or bookstores.
I was just gonna say, my thing is like, I totally agree. I think comic book stores there's just more to look at, so they're more fun to go through. But I'm maybe you're the same. I've always been like a bookstore person. It was like record stores, and then as I got older, but even when I was younger, I used to like to go into bookstores. But in my 30s, in particular, I used to go to a bookstore in North Hollywood called the Iliad. It's actually amazing. For our listeners in Los Angeles area that probably know about it, but I could just like, I mean, it's interesting. I have such a strange interest in books too, because it's like, it was heavy on the new age stuff, but it wasn't because I was interested in, I was interested in the content, but not, it's just like, it was book collecting, like curiosity or something like that, like buying like Osho books and things like this.
What are Osho books?
Osho's the guy that they did that documentary about the cult from India that took over the town in Oregon.
Oh, yeah.
So like I used to have a bunch of, interestingly enough, I sold the entire collection. I had tons of, like I had a new age like library basically after a while, because I was just always buying all these weird books. But Trey McCarthy, I sold all of them to him. He's just as weird in that way, like he's just sort of like things, but they're interesting things. Like, I mean, if you even look at like a Hare Krishna book or something like that, it's just like they're interesting books to have around.
I was obsessed with for a while an archive of pamphlets and art from the Children of God cult, which is, as far as cults go, one of the most despicable and evil.
Very evil. Yeah, I didn't know I've never seen any books around. Where were you finding? Were there publications?
I don't remember. It was probably, I was like obsessed with that cult for a while because the whole thing is so demented, and how big it got and how it was allowed to function. It's just sort of mind blowing. But like in the 70s in particular, they would produce all this like utopian art, like these like prints of, what the amazing future is going to look like when we're all children of God. And, that stuff, because actually the pamphlets are creepy because it's just normalizing the gross stuff that they were into. But the artwork is this completely divorced from reality, like 70s post-hippie visions of like a utopian future, which is, and then it's made even stranger by how depraved they were. And if anyone doesn't know, Children of God was what was the thing, the hippies for Jesus thing called? Is that where the phrase Jesus lovers comes from?
Oh, like Jesus freaks or whatever?
Jesus freaks. So running around in a school bus, cult of Jesus freaks. But really, the leader of the cult, whose name escapes me now,
David Berg? Is that?
Yes, David Berg. He was a sexual predator that understood how to push buttons of people. Ultimately, what they were all about was having sex with children and normalizing it.
Yeah.
amongst other things. That's the most egregious thing, but there's many
so
other
much
horrible things about them.
The Phoenix, weren't the Joaquin and River Phoenix, weren't their family members of that cult? And also, I'm just naming, I mean, this is like searchable. This isn't, but I forget his name now. Christopher, the dude that was in that band Girls, sort of like an early 2010 era, like,
oh, I don't know,
notable indie band from San. They're pretty good. I forget his name. Anyway, he came out of that cult too, or
yeah. Supposedly, like with the Phoenixes, what happened was the cult got so powerful and strong and entangled in people's lives. Like they were quasi missionaries in, I don't remember, Asia, South America, something like that. The turning the kids into sex slaves, basically, that happened after the cult was well established and was already doing things like splitting up families, forcing people to get divorced and married to other members. So they were somewhere out in the world in one of their compounds. If it's to be believed, the like parents of the Phoenixes started to hear inklings of what was happening and they got out. Because the alternative is that all those children were sexually abused.
Yeah, they were. That cult was. I mean, all those cults were abusing children for the most part. All of them.
Yeah, they always do. But yeah,
but they were definitely in the business of like normalizing it through their teachings. It seems I haven't gone as deep in that. I'm so on. We could do this whole episode actually on cults because I feel like living where I live. I don't know if I should disclose that, but like it's a cult town and there's so many cults here. And I'm always like, I just went out to like a 420 event last night. Well, I stopped by and I couldn't hang because it's like everyone you talk to here has like some sort of, they're in a cult of one.
Well, it's funny because they do always head for the hills so that they can isolate their members.
Yeah. And
so if you live in the hills, you're going to run into them.
Yeah, I've almost gotten ensnared in that here when I first came, which was like, it doesn't matter. It was like a source, but it was like a source family related, kind of, not really a cult though. It was like an ex-member, a very well-known ex-member of the source family that lived here. And he had access and was living on property. It wasn't his, but he was very much preaching to me and anyone who would listen, like his intent to like start. I mean, they always frame it as like a utopian community, like commune style, but there were tenets and they were Kabbalah based, and I was like very much getting indoctrinated into that. I was, truth be told, I was like going through like an extremely difficult time that was probably kind of leading to like a midlife crisis kind of or something. So I was vulnerable, and that's how these cult people work. They can like smell vulnerability on people and they work every angle. And if they're good, a lot of them are trained in like neuro-linguistic programming, so they can like brainwash you and you don't even know it. Like it's like hypnotizing you through like, anyway, yeah. I mean, that was my experience at least. And now that I've had some distance out of it, I kind of snapped out of it when COVID happened. I can really see like how all this works, like how good people get caught up in that stuff very easily if they're vulnerable.
Oh, totally. Because it's no different than getting caught into any abusive or toxic relationship on some level. Like the mechanics of it are the same. It's just the environment or the context is different. Like,
yeah, definitely.
Like I had a job that when I quit that job, I had grief coming out of it because I'd realized that like I'd spent 4 years of my life in this extremely insane, toxic environment. I don't think it's that much different than people who realize like that they find themselves deep into some kind of toxic relationship or a cult, because like that, the love bombing and the favoritism and the push and pull of affection or praise or encouragement or whatever, it's like the same deal.
Yeah, I had one last thing to say about cults, but I forget. Anyway, yeah, but they're super interesting. I like I think it's a popular topic for a lot of people, in the last few years through podcasts, and I feel like I know about so many of them now, also living on the West Coast and where I live, like even like way lesser known cults, like now I'm probably almost going to give my location away, but like the Saint Germain, like the I Am people,
I don't know them.
and oh, that shit's crazy. I'll just try to dig up a video and I'll send it to you, because it's basically like basically the first, there were like predecessors to the New Age movement in like the late 1800s, like just sort of occultism, like I'm trying to think, like Madame Blavatsky and just like people like writing. But then it wasn't really a mainstream thing until like the Depression, which is like, makes sense because the entire country is vulnerable.
Yeah, and a crisis of meaning.
Right time, right place for a pyramid scheme, right? And so that's basically what the Saint Germain Foundation, and I won't get into all the explanations of what that cult is, but they basically defrauded like millions. They were huge in the 30s. There were like millions of followers, and they were found guilty in court of defrauding people like of money, like during the Depression, and just really, wow. They've been so discounted. But if they're like, the funny thing about them is that they still have a really far-reaching influence, and that they were essentially, as I said, the first sort of mainstream New Age kind of thing to happen in this country, and a lot of the principles and their teachings and stuff were then sort of revitalized, like in the, I don't know, like in the self-help. You can sense traces of them from certain like self-help people like Wayne Dyer. I don't know. This is like, or Eckhart Tolle. Like a lot of the stuff or The Secret, all that stuff. You can get like, oh wow, that really did have like a huge influence on like, I don't know, like a lot of stuff that we are still living with. But they're essentially super obscure. Like they have a very small following now. I have a good friend here who has her son. She's a former IAMer, and she still has her kid like in one of their schools here, and it's sort of strange because I'm just like, okay, anyway, but yeah, it's a curious thing.
There is like a I don't know, a baby with the bathwater approach that I think needs to be taken with cults. Like if you still have your kid in the school of the cult, then have you really come to grips with what it is, or were you just like, oh, it's just too much for me? Like that's the thing people did with Scientology. Like there's all these people that before David Miscavige once David Miscavige came to power, they left Scientology, and they insist that the problem is Miscavige and that he wasn't the right heir to L. Ron Hubbard, but Miscavige was the perfect heir to L. Ron Hubbard. Complete manipulative, psychopathic, greedy monster who knew, Miscavige knows that L. Ron Hubbard was full of shit. That's why he has no qualms about just making stuff up, because he knew that L. Ron Hubbard, every time people couldn't fly, he had to invent another level of Scientology for them to get to. And then Miscavige just does the same thing. But there's all these people, like you'll see it on like message boards, like older people, like boomers, basically. They lament what happened to Scientology. They don't understand that it was like
the old school the pre-Miscavige.
Yeah.
Era, right?
They don't understand that from the start, it was a criminal enterprise. From day one, it was a psyop to get money and power. It was never about helping anyone. And L. Ron Hubbard understood hypnotism.
So are there
stuff like that?
Are there Scientologists that practice and I should know this, because on a side note of my source family affiliation, and where I live, I was at the time playing in a band with this guy from the source family, but the drummer was a Scientologist, or he was like a practicing, I think he very much still practiced Scientology, but he had left the organization. He's like in his early 80s now. Like he was like a Scientologist in the 60s or something. That's the
perfect age for it. That's the perfect age, like, to believe that all the toxic stuff was a side effect, not a benefit. But like if you were to just as an observer read everything you possibly could about Scientology, you would be like, no, all the toxic stuff is baked into it from the start. Like it was about black magic, it was about mind control, it was about extracting money, it was about having power over people from day one. It was never not about any of that. So like what it is today is what would happen if you raised people in Scientology from like a young age. It's exactly what it should be.
It's similar with the Hare Krishnas, which also maybe we could talk about sometime because it relates to like hardcore, obviously. But there are OG people who want nothing to do with ISKCON that came into the movement when the guru Prabhupada, whatever the guy that brought it when he was still alive. But the thing is he wasn't really full of it, and he wasn't a scammer. You know what I mean? Like he was a legit thing. But in either case, and in all cases, there's child abuse. There's like so much like to distance yourself from. All of these cults definitely have these really unavoidable, horrible things about them.
I mean, I feel like this is a super misunderstood topic in general by a lot of people, but there's this really important thing to understand the way that narcissists get off on bringing everyone down to their level of corrupting everything and everyone around them. And they don't have to be cult leaders. Like it could be, for example, Jeffrey Epstein would be a great example of like a criminal mastermind, a psychopath, a narcissist who sought to corrupt everyone and just bring them all down to his depraved, soulless level. And you see that in cult. Like in Children of God, for example, it couldn't just be David Berg as a child predator. He couldn't leave it at that. He had to make it that everyone in the group has it normalized that it's okay to have sex with children, and that one of the ways that that group did outreach, and this was to get money, not to get converts, is he would essentially turn women in the group into streetwalkers.
Flirty fishing, they called it.
Flirty fishing, yeah, totally. And the idea was that he would convince these women that they were fishing for souls like Jesus by having sex with men, and that money was benefiting, I mean, essentially Christianity would be the way to put it, his true, pure form of Christianity. But ultimately, like, what did he do? He just got off on breaking everyone's soul. Like L. Ron Hubbard was certainly the same way, and he legitimately was into black magic only 10 years before. Like
was
not
he like into Aleister Crowley and stuff like that?
Yeah. There's a letter from Aleister Crowley to someone else about how L. Ron Hubbard and this guy Jack Parsons were trying to raise some kind of female.
Jack Parsons,
some kind of female demon goddess.
Yeah.
And they had been writing to Crowley, letting him know about their progress in that regard. It's like, go from that to, oh, I want to help everyone. It's just like, no, you're already suspicious,
Yeah, I mean, when you look at all these people too, they're all basically degenerates, right?
Oh,
very much
because one of the
hedonists,
things that they used to do, I forgot about this. I heard someone talking on a podcast recently. Was sit and stare into each other's eyes while masturbating as some sort of way of breaking down their own personal boundaries, which is like, that's a huge Scientology thing. That whole idea of breaking down your boundaries, convincing you that it's for your benefit, but it's not to make you malleable.
I mean, that's awful. It also sorry. It also sounds like a Jackass sketch. Like it's sort of like Heterosexual Chicken. Like it's so up though. Like I would never be, but like and it also sounds like something that would be in like a Larry Clark movie too, or something, and just something like a edit out of Bully or something like that.
Heterosexual Chicken.
the oncoming train. But here's the thing. Here's what's really funny about that is, check this out. When I was deep in my new age, like, I mean, I think you were somewhat observational of that via social media. But when I was way down the rabbit hole when I first moved here, I went to a I went to a men's group, but we didn't jack off and stare into each other's eyes. But there was an exercise where we basically had to pick someone in the room that we didn't know and do. I think we had to do like 5 minutes of staring deep into each other's eyes, and it was like, it was
that's
so
a Scientology thing.
Oh, it probably comes from that. Yeah. And I picked a dude. It was weird. It was fine for me. I got no weird vibes. It was a real old guy that kind of reminded me of like a relative or something. So for me, I actually, but if you could pick the wrong dude, man, that's like Russian roulette. You might have your soul stolen from you. You know what I mean? Just like raped through your mind, like locked eyes for like 5 minutes with like the wrong, like the BTK killer or something. You don't know who you're getting.
Yeah. No, the Scientology thing, it's longer than that though. You're supposed
like
to do it for an extended period of time to where it makes you start tripping and stuff. And it's ultimately, like with Scientology in particular, everything is basically always a form of hypnotism.
Right, because wasn't actually Hubbard like a master of NLP?
Don't know, but I do know that I've heard upper level teachings where, like, you say teachings, it sounds religious. It's just L. Ron Hubbard ranting to people who have paid a lot of money to get to the point where he doesn't have to lie to them anymore. And so one of the things that he talks about, he specifically is describing one of the low-level, entry-level Scientology courses, one of the communications courses. And he's talking about, in the communications course, it's pitched to you that what you're doing is learning how to be ultra clear in your communications and in your intentions. So you'll walk around the room with a Scientology instructor and they will be like, look at the door. You look at it. Walk towards the door. You walk towards the door. Raise your hand to touch the door, but don't touch it. Touch the doorknob. Remove your hand. They give you all these instructions, and the idea is that on its face, it's about clarity. But of course, what is it really doing? It's conversational hypnosis designed to wear down your natural defenses, because instead of going, why? This is stupid. Who cares? You're going, it's completely normal to take direction from other people over inconsequential things. And in this upper level teaching, it's probably like on archive.org, is probably where I heard it. He is telling them that that's a form of hypnosis designed to break down someone's natural boundaries. And all these people would have gone through that. They would have paid money to go through that. And now they're so brainwashed and so bought in that he can now tell them the truth that it was a form of hypnosis. It's the most insane thing I've ever heard.
Thing with the Scientologists, what's I don't know what it is, but like maybe it's because of what you described, but I've always found them to be so drab and tedious, and like they have zero attractive qualities to me. Like, a lot of these other cults, I can see the appeal, even, like Osho, who's probably like the most hated. There's something about, maybe I'm just more Eastern oriented, because obviously I got wrapped up with the Krishnas, and it's definitely defined my idea of God and spirituality and on a basic level. But like, there's something so boring about Scientology. I feel so bad for the people trapped in that cult, because it seems like it is the most brutally, It feels like if you're a Scientologist, because I used to live right near like the Scientology Center in LA, like a year ago I was there. And it seemed like the people that were living there and that were all like right there, it seemed like you're now working a 24-hour, like the worst job ever for 24 hours a day. Like it just feels like a bad job.
I can't remember, $80 a week or something like that.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
With a billion-year contract.
It's confusing. I think in LA, obviously, they have a huge foothold, and I think it's because there's so much connection to Hollywood. And I think a lot of people think it will further their career, whether it's as a celebrity, like an actor, but also behind, a writers. I think there are a lot of people in the industry that are Scientologists in LA. Because when you drive around, you see a lot of people have the Scientology badge on their car and shit. They're like holding it down there, you know?
Yeah, they are boring. You know, it's all framed up as being a rational way to solve your emotional problems.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, one of the most telling things is their filtration is to make sure that you don't have emotional problems when you come in. They don't want to fix your emotional problems. Like, you want someone who has insecurity, but there's actually nothing wrong with them. So then you can propose that you're solving their problems, but they don't have problems. You actually create the problems for them by making them further insane. You know what I mean? Like how I
gaslighting people, basically.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that at this point in time, Tom Cruise can't act. Like, when you watch something like the most recent Mission Impossible movie, which is a great movie and I love it, but
yeah, he's kind of awesome.
He doesn't seem like he's capable of projecting emotion or truly acting anymore.
He's just like this robot now, right?
Yeah,
like
totally. Like, Cruise, he changes his tone of voice, but you're not sure. It was I just remember thinking, like, I wonder if he knows how to act anymore, or if he just memorizes things and then has to do facial expressions, hoping that it comes through, as opposed to that little string where he was out of Scientology, where he had all those breakthrough parts, like that one Paul Thomas Anderson movie where he's like the motivational speaker.
Yeah.
That
he was like Mike Cernovich in that.
Hitman. Yeah, totally. I forget that. What's the Michael Mann movie where he's the hitman? Collateral.
Oh yeah, I mean, he's done so many good movies.
That might be the
I think
time
Tom
he
Cruise
acted in a movie.
Yeah, I mean, when he was younger, he was obviously he's a really gifted actor. But yeah, I think he has just become I don't know. There's these like people, these celebrity actors that like him that people really despise just based on like his sign. But like you mentioned Mission Impossible, and I feel like Scientology almost did kind of enable him to become like this lunatic that will like hang off, do his own stunts, and then
I legit think he's the one dude for who maybe understood, who maybe decided that all the OT stuff was actually a metaphor, but that he could do anything. You know what I mean? He's like, okay, I can't literally fly, but there's no reason why I can't hang on to the outside of a plane with a wire.
Right. You know? I like Tom Cruise. I think, you know what I mean? Like, I know he had like his moment where he was losing his mind in the media and all that stuff. But at one time when I lived in LA, I think I was telling you I had a job for doing QC for quality control for film and television, and I had to do some Mission Impossible stuff. It was just a low way. I had a back injury and I couldn't do my regular job, so I took this job because I had to watch all the extras, the interviews with Tom Cruise and all this stuff. And he is like absolutely like an artificial human being, but like I could totally kick it with Tom Cruise. He seems like he's pretty genuinely kind, I think. I don't know if it's just for show, but I think he bought like the whole crew like Rolexes. Like he was just like super grateful to like all the people that worked on the film at the end of it and stuff like that. But again, I feel like he is almost like a two-dimensional human being, like he's just a program or something. That
I agree. Like I love those movies, but I also watch his range like dying before my eyes, which I think is very interesting. Yeah,
Steven
I definitely
Seagal,
think he's the one dude that the lunacy of the things that he does, I do think that is a direct result of his Scientology.
Yeah, and you might be right. Maybe he's like one of the few people that actually just like kind of got it.
He's the only dude it worked for.
Kind of. I mean, I can't think
him and that guy Grant Cardone, the billionaire like real estate guy.
Oh, is he a Scientologist?
Oh yeah, hardcore.
Okay.
But he used to hide it for a while. He stopped talking about it for a long time. Then he started again. I think they put pressure on him.
You know, and then it's like that dude Cedric from Mars Volta or whatever. That's what baffles me. I don't know too many people, you know, that have fallen into it, like band people or whatever. And I don't see how people get attracted to it. But if you're living in LA and you end up at the wrong party that's a low key, like at Beck's house accidentally, you might end up.
Yeah, you meet some hot model or actress and you're like, oh, these people are Scientologists?
Oh, maybe
Jason Lee is a Scientologist? This isn't so bad.
Oh, right, yeah, totally. Who, by the way, I think we talked about off record is also, I mean, he has no affiliation anymore, right? Like he just sort of quietly dipped.
He quietly quit. He moved to the literal middle of nowhere, Denton, Texas.
Right.
He didn't
Didn't
say
he move
that's
back
why
to LA?
he moved there. He did, but like he was in Texas for a
long time,
a good stretch, and he basically left Hollywood. People who talk about Scientology are brave because they're going to come for you, and so he doesn't address it at all, other than in one little local newspaper like 5 years ago. He had opened a photography, like an art center in Denton, Texas. And there were all these rumors that it was some kind of Scientology outreach thing. And some little local newspaper, like a weekly paper in Denton, interviewed him. And they asked about it. And he said, I'm not a Scientologist. This isn't associated with any religion. The one thing a Scientologist is not going to do is lie about not being a Scientologist. Because, it's the greatest thing ever. So I think like once he felt like the heat was off, then he moved back to LA. It's just like how Beck is not a Scientologist anymore.
He isn't? I thought he was, because he was raised in it.
Yeah.
He left it?
He doesn't address it other than to say that he's not a Scientologist. This was in the last 5 years, I want to say.
Because you know what? I have a lot of criticisms of or critiques. But like, I think he's an artist that like I had a general impression that his involvement with Scientology made him a lamer artist, a more milquetoast, like the kind of shit you buy at Starbucks.
I don't know. I like those quasi-ambient records of his. I don't remember what it's called, but I don't really listen to him. Yeah, Kim listened to that record a lot.
Yeah, I mean, he's a very talented guy. And like it's my take, it's my subjective opinion, but like it was I guess a kinder way of putting it would be, and when he came on the scene, he was a complete freak show, like kind of that was the aesthetic, I guess, of the time in the 90s or whatever. And he matured. I mean, that would be the reasonable thing, but it did seem like through the late 90s he was still kind of holding on. Like he did that record where he kind of like has like a Cool Keith sounding track and like
is it Midnight Vultures? Yeah, that record's fantastic.
Yeah, so
it was. I recall it being fantastic.
And then he just went like real straight. My preference doesn't go that way. Anyway.
Welcome to Nail Worship Radio.
Long intro.
All right, before we go any further, just explain the shirt to me real quick.
Do you really want an explanation of it?
Well, I can't read it. I thought it was an unwound shirt for a minute.
Yeah, I was smoking too much weed.
Does it say New Wind?
I don't know. I made another shirt that was an unwound bootleg, and then I wanted to do a Nirvana bootleg, but I wasn't really that concerned with what. I just wanted to use whatever it is, Onyx, like because I felt like, and I wanted to use the vestibule like this is like that was like the iconic Nirvana design. In terms of what the word is, I just in my stoned logic I was like, I'll just use those letters. It was like an unwound but without the vowels, kind of like the way they're doing at the end on the other design. And I was like, oh yeah, they kind of relate. Not. And then I was like, oh, I'll just do it like New Wound but like with the dropped vowels. But then all the text I put into this then relates to the idea of trepanation, which is the practice of drilling a hole in your skull. It's like an ancient practice that then also kind of got revitalized, like underground in London in the 60s. There's a book called Boar Skull. A guy wrote about doing it to himself and his girlfriend and how it like activates like you're tripping permanently. And I guess you are like it does a thing. Jeez. So I really down the rabbit hole on this concept on this shirt. I don't know. I'm kind of embarrassed by it now. I still have a ton of these because it was just the first screen printing project, and I was just kind of doing it as a piece of art that nobody else could understand or would understand. But then the idea of the bullet in the head, like then I was like, well, then that's Kurt Cobain. And then so the back of the shirt has like
it's got like a Sub Pop type logo on it, right?
Yeah, well, it's the Dream Body logo, like Sub Pop style, and then yeah. But then the text is flipped backwards so that the shirt would be like the Sabotage album, like Black Sabbath or something. But then the text on the back, instead of like, I think on the Nirvana shirt, it used to say like crack smoking, fudge packing, Satan worshiping, like something. So mine just has some nonsense I came up with that refers to being the murderer of Kurt Cobain. I used to smoke way too much weed.
This is the second episode in a row where that topic's going to come up and I'm going to bleep out his name.
I'm gonna get murdered by him probably soon. You know, if yeah, you might need to. You got to bleep his name out. Yeah, but
In the other
yeah,
episode, it was better because you said I was behind blank who also killed Kurt Cobain.
well, that's the thing. There's two people, and like I knew them both like at one time, sort of one more than the other. Whatever, cringy that I should stop bringing up Nirvana, dude. It makes it worse.
I think it's at this point it might be good if it's brought up every time. Like if
Yeah,
you don't bring it up, if I say, okay, so how does this Menace the Bastard record figure into Nirvana?
I know, right?
What does this Taylor Swift record have to do with Nirvana?
I know. Yeah, they're the Big Bang. Everything came from them. It's like how what was it with the Jawbox Lincoln thing? I'm getting it backwards now.
Oh yeah. Lincoln caused Jawbox.
Lincoln caused everything, so we can just say Nirvana. Just it was like, yeah,
hey,
influenced the Beatles.
Before we get into what we thought was going to be the actual topic, I did learn what was up with Tommy Iommi's fingers. So we were talking Tony Iommi. So we were talking about how he played guitar left-handed, right? And then he had missing a bunch of his fingertips. They got like chopped off in like a machining accident. So we're talking about Black Sabbath. If you don't know, if you see a Black Sabbath video, he's got his fingers are all taped up. He melted stuff down to make like a fake kind of fingertip because it hurt so bad to play guitar. And then he would tape those on. So his fingers are all taped up because he's got like essentially he made like DIY prosthetic fingertips for the fingers that had been the fingertips that had been chopped off. And then the whole reason he played a drop tuning was to have less tension on the strings. It wasn't an aesthetic decision. It was to make it hurt less bad to play guitar.
That makes total sense.
It also makes me, since knowing that, like want to listen to more stuff and see how fast he really ever played. Because obviously I don't associate him with playing fast. But if you're playing like with a bunch of shit on your fingers and it hurts, it would be interesting to see, because it's like they're whatever, like the first metal band, but the thing we associate with metal is actually like speed, which we don't associate with Black Sabbath. And it did make me want to listen to more stuff and be like, does he ever really like kind of pick up the pace, or does he always have to kind of take it easy on his fingers, which is kind of wild.
Yeah, well, when I think of his like in terms of his like I don't know, I'm losing the word here, but like his style of like when he solos and shreds and Sabbath, he definitely isn't like slow, but he's not like I'm thinking of, by contrast, that AC/DC video I sent you. It's like Angus Young has this insanely frenetic. He's kind of like almost him, and maybe he's just so influential in that. Like he just when an AC/DC solo takes off, it's pretty shreddy and fast and stuff. Whereas like Tony Iommi, he doesn't have that kind of speed, and that had to be a horrible experience to go through. And it's amazing he like persevered and became like basically one of the guitar greats. I
know, how amazing. The other thing I was wondering about, I don't even remember what I read where I picked up that little bit of information, but I did wonder if that he played left-handed because of using those fingers. It was easier using them on the frets than holding a pick. I was wondering about like if he actually wasn't left-handed and he switched in order to continue playing, which would kind of fit because he played like right-handed guitar, right?
Multiple fingers chopped, right?
I want to say 3.
Yeah, because Jerry Garcia, I think because Jerry Garcia had a same thing. I think same hand, but it was one finger, and it was like he used it as picking hand, I think. But if you're missing more than one, I think you probably wanna.
Should we talk about Crud?
Yeah, let's. One last thing about the left-handed thing is that Kurt Cobain, since we got there was a Nirvana podcast, he played guitar left-handed, but he wrote with his right hand. I think Jimi Hendrix maybe too, maybe not Jimmy, but I know Kurt for sure. So that's the other damning thing about the crime scene, is that the way they set it up, like, so he would have used his right hand to pull a trigger to a gun, but whoever set the scene up just assumed he would have used his left hand. And the thing is, Kurt Cobain was like into guns, like I mean, he was like a redneck. So like not really, but like he grew up in the country and he was familiar with guns. So he had guns. And Dylan Carlson, they used to go shooting. He's on MTV talking about it. Like, yeah, we go shooting, like the band interview, like we're into it. But he would have used a firearm with his right hand. Whoever set up that suicide scene, they set it up so it made it look like he fired the gun with his left hand. Yeah, there's a famous photo shoot where he has a gun in I don't know, it's one of the last photo shoots, and it shows him holding a gun, like pointing it to the camera. It's just like an editorial shoot, and he's holding it with his right hand. So I mean, this is plain as day.
Interesting. It's like funny because I don't want to stretch that out, but I do think it's interesting. The idea that playing right-handed is based on the picking and strumming, not the part that requires you to be more dexterous.
Yeah,
it's weird. Like it seems like it would be your right hand would be doing the thing that, to me, is the more difficult part of the activity.
It is pretty weird, but as I've played for so long,
I can't even imagine doing it, like playing left-handed, but on its face, it seems like it would make way more sense that
you're right. Yeah, I don't know
simpler movement.
There's nothing else I can do with my left hand that is that technical. That's weird. You know what I mean?
Me neither. Even if just when I shave my head, it's more difficult, and that's blunt. That's not like there's no finesse, and I still got up spots.
Right. Yeah. Totally. It's like. Yeah, we got to get a sponsorship from Freebird.
Are they the ones that give you the thing that just where it rolls across your head?
I mean, there's a lot of companies that make these like skull shaver things that just make it easy, so you could just it contours, so it's like. But yeah, maybe if we get big, we should stay because we both shave our. That'd be so fucking funny.
If we could just do it for every episode, always have a clean shaved head, every single thing.
Yeah. I could be like
10 minutes
while
before.
I'm doing it. It would be disgusting, right?
Because all the little hairs that fell around my neck.
Yeah, totally.
It'd be funny if I just draw a black box over you every time you show that joint, just to make sure that we don't have zero chance at monetization. Just a moving black box.
Make it really, like digital, like digitize the whole. I don't care. That would look
just
good.
Just blur it, actually.
Yeah. Or a big black box floating around is cool. Like even if it's like super annoying, I think that's good. Yeah. Sorry about all that. I've had a high anxiety week with the landlord, and I had to clean up another flood, and I'm just extra leaning in. And it's 420 weekend, so hey, man.
That's okay. My new thing is grounding, where I sit outside with no shoes on for as long as is humanly possible.
Right. I thought you were going to tell me you had a patch of grass under your feet right now, under your
No, but I am going to buy a grounding mat for
good
working and for sleeping. And I'm going to make all my kids use them.
I'm kind of OCD. Like I know the benefit of it, and I've appreciated it while on LSD. But I have a thing about having clean feet at all times. So I have
it's funny because Kim was like, Jesus, your feet are black. Which is like out of character, because normally I'm yelling at everyone in the house to put slippers on so that they stop stubbing their toes all the time. It irritates me because I'm like, just wear slippers all the time, period.
Yeah.
Then you'll stop stubbing your toes or stepping on, like, I don't know, whatever. But no one does.
Gotta get some slides for the house.
Yeah. But then I'm like, now I'm the dude that goes outside like fully dressed with no shoes on to go work on a computer.
Yeah, you're a hippie.
I play with the dog in the backyard with no shoes on, like all these things that I would have told the kids, like, put shoes on, and now I'm like, take your shoes off.
The dilemma of that is like the dirty feet thing too, because I dated my ex of 7 years was like essentially a Hawaiian. She was raised in Hawaii, and so she was a very barefoot person most of her life, and I just couldn't understand. Like I was like, your feet are always filthy.
And it's funny, this is like within 10 days that I don't care.
Yeah, I should let go of it, because I honestly also, this is a high anxiety thing too, but because I'm so anxious, my feet, hands, and armpits are like sweating all week. So like slippers and socks are almost intolerable. I'm just like, Anyway, TMI.
I would have to test this. I don't know how to, but I've also read that grounding, which like basically puts you in a neutral charge with the Earth's electrical current or whatever.
What do you sound like you're a hippie now. I'm just kidding.
No, but I'm so concerned with like inflammation
I believe
and
you.
stuff like that. And
I'm totally in line with that. Yeah, like
well, it's one of those things where it was probably like a YouTube short that said something where I thought, there's no way that's true. That's absurd. Then I researched it and was like, oh, it's not absurd. Like I am looking at whatever MRIs of people showing their like before and after of like inflammation, 2 hours of grounding, and the inflammation spots are all back in the blue. And then like some like hospitals that do grounding with premature infants to stabilize their heart rate. And one of the things that it supposedly does is, you know, like if you're in a state of anxiety, you're probably in your brain waves are probably at high beta. That's fight or flight, basically. So there are ways to get yourself down to a low beta or an alpha or whatever other state. Like one way is to do it with tuning forks, which I use. And then another way is that grounding supposedly brings you immediately down to alpha, which alpha is like a meditative, introspective, conversational state. And I will say that like on the days I work outside for like an extended period of time, all my normal work anxiety is gone, and it lasts a while. And it doesn't matter what I'm doing. Like it's the same work I'm normally doing, except I'm stressed out and freaked out about it, and no stress. But it is fun. It sounds very woo-woo, but then I'm also of the belief that many thousands of years ago it was basically perfect, and then humans made it not perfect.
Yeah.
I'm like so embarrassed about the things that I believe in, but I have I have a historical record of being right. Like I remember like I started like drinking butter and fat in coffee like a really long time ago, like 2010 maybe. Yeah. And people thought I was out of my mind.
Yeah, that's a real thing. What is that, bulletproof coffee or something?
Yeah. And like and you know, I would even like go for checkups and they'd ask, and I would like, you'd be telling, like, I would talk about my diet and they would be like, what? And I was like, what? It's good cholesterol that lowers your bad cholesterol. And then like in that time, since I started drinking it, it's now widely understood. If you have bad high cholesterol, you don't eat enough fat. Everyone understands that now. You know, I like say this to my family because they always think I'm crazy. And I was like, name a thing I've been wrong about. And furthermore, if I was wrong, didn't I admit it quickly? Like if I was wrong about something, I'm comfortable with being like, oh yeah, I didn't really read that and I skimmed over it and I got it wrong. But in general, you know, autism, I research shit a lot and then I know what I'm talking about.
Well, sound, we've talked about this before, but the sound healing stuff is very, that the electromagnetic field stuff is very real. And I should do a bit more grounding. I mean, for sure. Everybody out here is, I really hate having dirty feet. That's the thing.
Well, it's funny too, because it's just like one of those things that human beings used to be in that state round the clock. Or close to it, because like they wore leather sandals or whatever, not artificial or not synthetic rubber shoes. And their floors were built on the ground or whatever. I mean, or you did stuff outside. So even just me and you, from the time that we were kids to now, like my children can go easily a full 24-hour cycle without ever being in like a grounded state. That would have been somewhat difficult for me as a kid.
I'm barefoot right now, and it's because of the thing I was saying. Like I find having things on my feet kind of intolerable right now, just because I'm so anxious. But I do notice that I'm always perpetually in a non-grounded. I actually appreciate this. I'm going to try to practice it a bit myself, because I'm always in nature, but I always have like hiking boots on, you know, and
like you leave your yard too. You got to like watch out for the world, basically.
Yeah, but I'm also just like always near water, like at the lake and stuff, and there's just like a lot of just sand and just it's definitely super important. if you ever visit here, I mean, literally where I'm moving, downstairs is like basically the epicenter of the town crystal store, where you can buy, like, they have books, obviously like new age books, but crystals. But then they have a whole like room where you can buy like crystal bowls and like tuning forks of different frequencies, and like it's pretty
Yeah, I
cool.
use tuning forks almost daily because I definitely have ADHD, and I think I'm autistic, which means that I'm perpetually in too low a brain state, and then my brain overcompensates and goes into high beta, which then causes anxiety about nothing, just causes anxiety, and then you fixate on things to be anxious about. And so I use the tuning forks to get into low beta. Like alpha. Like if I have a meeting, I'll use the tuning forks to get into the alpha state.
I should do it too. I'm gonna take your lead on these things, because I can now, my new neighbors, I can just go downstairs and buy some or something. So, whatever.
Cool.
I'm just
I
saying.
use them to help my daughter fall asleep. Like I do like the delta, it makes like a delta binaural bait in her ear. We do it like 5 or 6 times or whatever, just going back and forth. Like you have like one that's stable and one that will create that frequency, and then you just listen to it until the sound dissipates. You switch hands, you do it again. The idea is that eventually your brain switches itself on faster. Eventually it recognizes this is a delta tone, it's time to go to bed, or it's time to fall asleep. But in the beginning, you have to do it for a long, you have to do it like 5 or 6 times, and you have to sort of mentally tell yourself like, this is beta, and get your brain to like my mother insists that for her, if she like hits the beta ones, it's like 10 seconds. It's just on.
Yeah. You know how I fell asleep the other night was watching a documentary about the BTK killer. And I'm like, I gotta change some shit. And like that's the type of shit I'm putting into my brain as I'm dozing off. So yeah, it's pretty rough. I
talk about it, but I was listening to some bummer stuff the other night. I was like doing the dishes, and I laughed at something because someone like made a joke. It was like an interview, and Kim was like, "What are you listening to?" I was like, "Well, ostensibly what it's about is this." And she's like, "Why would you listen to that?" And I was like,
"Yeah,
I got to be informed. Like, this is a real issue."
I don't know why I subject myself, because it's just garbage. It's so dark, and it's like we've talked about, but it's put me in this frame of mind also where I like wonder, because you watch these people get sentenced and you're like, good, there's justice. But then you try to kind of, as you watch more of these, you try to put yourself in, okay, what's the epilogue to this? Like the life imprisonment. And then I was starting to watch these channels where guys talk about what it's like to be, and it's just like, man, on the new age, thing, how they say, like, use your words wisely, or maybe that's kind of like a kind of good spiritual principle, and it matters what you put in your head and stuff. And I started to feel like I was mentally putting myself in prison, or not in a criminal mindset, because I can never relate to like a murderer or anything like that, but just in that world mentally of the victims and I can't really stop, to be honest. Like even last night I was watching, I just watched 48 Hours. So it's like, not as gruesome as some of these interrogation videos and stuff, but yeah, it is helpful to be informed for sure. But man, yeah, BTK, that's I think I'll switch to tuning forks.
Well, too, like the other thing too is like you get into, like, you put yourself in that alpha state, you're not seeking out information for like whatever it does. It's got to be a dopamine thing, right? That we like seek out just new and novel information constantly, especially something like that that's so dark, is that even though you would think this won't give me a dopamine hit, but you're getting such a strange kind of information that you certainly are. You're constantly getting hit with like the unknown.
Yeah. There's a Death Grips track, I think, that's basically about this. What's it called? I've Seen Footage. You know that track? They have a video for it, and but I think it's kind of interesting thematically because I almost like look at Death Grips as being, they're a band, but they're kind of like they're artists, all of them. So like they're almost like an art project. It seems like thematically a lot. Some of their music is like the musical equivalent a lot of the time to like a snuff film lyrically and stuff. So
yeah.
I don't know. I like them, but that again, that's the kind of music I it's like some kinds of metal too that I almost kind of indulge in and then question like if it's adding anything to my life in a good way, you know. So,
well, it's funny because like, you know, I've been listening to that Celtic Frost Monotheist record a lot. You can make out the lyrics, but they're just not decipherable enough for me to truly understand what the statement is. It seems like it's pretty apparently I'm mad at God. And it's like constantly spitting out all the things wrong with God. And I do, like from my own perspective, listen to it and be like, is this really good for my mind? And as someone who has like a recent belief in God or a recent, I don't know, faith, you know, I'll question, I'm like, I don't have to listen to this. I could listen to something else. And then I'll be like, whatever, it's art. I can appreciate this thing like without it. I'm not brainwashing myself. You know what I mean? If anything, I can listen to it and be like, that was a stupid thing that dude just said. But it is funny. Like I think about that, you know, a lot, whether it's like that or Slayer.
But you could also look at it like when I haven't listened to Monotheist in a minute, but I'm familiar with it for sure. And like it in an instance like that or Slayer, but maybe more so that Celtic Frost record, it's a work of art. It could be read as like almost like a Dostoevsky book, like a character like spiting God, you know, just like, or smiting God. I don't know what the right, just like it's a character to me kind of when I listen to that. And I listen to that music for the guitar usually anyway. So it's like, you know, it's, and then, and isn't Tom Araya like a Catholic?
Tom Araya is a Catholic and the son of a preacher.
Right. So like,
or a
it's
deacon or something.
Even, kind of more salient in Slayer's case too, where it's just like, it's art.
I know. In Slayer's case, it's very bizarre.
Because it's so dark, you know?
Yeah, and like I always think it's funny that they wrote the best or most potent anti-abortion song ever, but from that song, you cannot place where they sit on the matter. Yeah. But like the song is like undeniably powerful and a condemnation of something, but because it's Slayer, you can't really say it's a condemnation. All you can say is it's an accurate description. And I think like that's
it's most likely pro-life if he's Catholic, right?
Yeah, but like I don't know that he wrote that song because it's like Jeff Hanneman wrote a lot of lyrics. Kerry King wrote a lot of lyrics too, I believe. And I think that Tom Araya has talked about that he would sing their lyrics and he would just decide in his own head what they were about. That's like kind of a funny thing. I mean, it's so like that idea of like interpreting something, because it's like, you know, you can listen to it, and I can't remember what song it is. It's like the second song in South of Heaven. You could listen to that and be like, oh, this is obviously like a pro-life song, or you could, this is obviously an indictment of humanity, and it's not saying don't do this. It's just saying we all suck. It all sucks across the board. It's like could be very black-pilled, basically, and nihilistic. And it's funny. I kind of need to read that Celtic Frost record, actually read the lyrics, just to actually wrap my head around what the statement is, because the whole record is obviously about God, but at the end of the day, I'm not exactly sure what it's saying.
I wish I still had it because I think it got pulled really quick. Since this is a Kurt Cobain podcast, you know, when Slayer released, I think it was Divine Intervention. But when it was first released, I think on the inside jacket, there was a photo of the closest thing we have to like a photo of his corpse. It was like the photo from outside of the greenhouse, and it had like Kurt Cobain. You could just see his leg. And and Slayer like just was like put it in, like it was so. And then on the somewhere in the artwork it had the famous photo of the person that carved Slayer.
Oh yeah.
And it's like bleeding. So yeah, they're obviously going for shock and all that. But yeah.
Yeah, totally.
The Kurt Cobain.